So, chapter 4 of the Lean Startup is about experimentation. And experimentation is probably the most important part of product development, especially at the start when you don't really know what your customers want. And there are two questions that you have to answer when you're developing a product. The first question to answer is the problem that I have chosen to solve really worth solving? Once you answer that, the next question becomes, what do I have to build to solve the problem for my users? And then there are all these other questions you have to answer as well, like who are my users? What exactly do they want? How exactly do they find out about products like mine? And Eric Ries has two concepts for you to summarize these two questions, and these concepts are the growth hypothesis and the value hypothesis. The growth hypothesis is how people find out about your product. How do you think people will find out about your product? And this is especially important for growing your product, because if you don't really understand how the early adopters of your product are going to find out about your product, how exactly are you going to promote your product in the right way? And then the second concept is the value hypothesis. How exactly does your product solve the problem for people who have the problem you're trying to solve? And how are you going to build something that they actually want? Now, where experimentation comes in to forming your value hypothesis and your growth hypothesis is in helping you sculpt a correct understanding of what your growth and value hypotheses should be. Because at the start, you only have assumptions about your users and about the problem you're trying to solve and about the product you're trying to create. You don't know what is the right thing to build. You don't know who the right person is for the product. You can only really have some understanding of the problem you're trying to solve. That's the only thing you can decide on when you're starting off. And once you decide on the problem, the next step is forming assumptions about what exactly the people who are going to be using your product value and who those people are going to be. And the way to test those assumptions is to build something really quickly and to find people who you think want the product and to let them use it. That is why experimentation is so important, because when you do that, you're actually just experimenting. You don't know if these people will actually find your product useful. You don't even know if what you've built is what they want. You're seeing their reaction to what you've built, which leads me on to my next point about user behavior. It's about seeing how people react to your product, not just asking them for verbal feedback, although that's important, not just forming focus groups and doing market research, really seeing how they behave in regards to your product, and then interpreting, just coming up with conclusions based on the behavior you see with the people you're testing your product with. And that's important because behavior doesn't really lie. Behavior gives you the most accurate data to act upon. If your users, for example, don't use your product, that's an indicator that your product doesn't work. Or maybe the problem you've chosen isn't even important in the first place. That's valuable data. Every action that a user does is valuable data. And sometimes you get user behaviors such as complaints about the absence of certain features or complaints about features you've created. Now that's useful behavioral data, because then you start to realize that, okay, people actually care about this product because they're caring enough to complain about it. So that's another example of useful user behavior data. The point is, it's all about testing your assumptions. It's all about building things really quickly and then testing them with the people you think will care and have the problem you're trying to solve, and then seeing how they react, and then constantly refining and improving the product that you're creating while keeping a steady pulse on user feedback. That's all that chapter 4 is about. It's just all about building an MVP, experimenting, just testing your assumptions by building something. And it all comes back down to the build, measure, learn feedback loop, where you build something, you measure the response that you get towards it, and then you learn from the feedback that you get, and then you build some more. in the direction that you're going in, or you change direction, you pivot, maybe you even change the problem that you were going for, and you solve an adjacent problem. That's all that the lean startup is about. It's all about building, measuring, and learning. And this is in contrast to what Eric Ries calls the just do it school of thought, where you just build something, you spend months building something, not testing assumptions at all, just building everything out, and then just launching, and then not really learning from the feedback that you're getting. That's not what you want to do. What you want to do is to build very minimally, and then test what you've built with your users, and then honestly respond to the feedback that you get. If what you've built is in your mind a good idea but does not really interest your users, you have to be confident and honest enough to admit to yourself that what you've built is not important and shouldn't be expanded upon, and that you need to go in a different direction. That's what the lean startup is about. It's not about building something for months on end only to launch it and then have it flop and then have it not be used. It's about building something in days, weeks, and then launching one bit at a time, testing every single iteration with your users, and then using user feedback as the main guiding light for product development. So that's really it for chapter 4 of the lean startup. Remember that an MVP is an experiment you're running to test if the problem that you've chosen to solve is important to the people you've chosen to serve the product to, and to also test if what you've built is actually something that interests people and actually solves the problem that you're trying to solve. It's testing your understanding of the problem, your understanding of the user, and your understanding of what needs to be built. That's what an MVP is for, and you're probably going to get it wrong many times over, but that's how you learn. You experiment, you build things iteratively, and then you respond based on user feedback. So that's all for chapter 4.